Praise be to Jesus Christ and welcome to Catholic Forum. I'm your host, Deacon Jim Thorndale. I'd like to welcome all those who are joining us on public TV and those who might be listening to on podcast. You know, we all have a journey in this life. We all go here, we go there, but many of us have a journey of faith that brings us many times into a relationship with the Lord in a different way. Many of us have a journey coming back into the fullness of faith in the Catholic Church. And tonight we have just such a guest with us, and his name is Mark Dubzinski. Mark, I want to thank you for being here.
It's nice to be here.
Thank you so much. Mark, your journey is interesting because you were born into a family that was, mother was a Methodist, and father was Catholic, but they decided to go into the Jehovah Witness.
Right.
How old were you, Mark, when that happened?
They started studying in 1967.
Okay.
We went into the church officially in 1968, and I was 8 years old.
Okay. So you were how old at that time?
8 years old.
8 years old. Your memories, do you have any memories of your Catholic or Methodist tradition at all?
Very little. I remember being in the Catholic Church and the incense.
Okay. Oh, yeah, of course. The smells and the bells.
The smells and the bells,
yeah.
and, you know, and I remember being at my mother's church in the basement, you know, when they served the coffee after church. And
okay.
Stuff like
Oh,
that.
at the Methodist church.
Yeah, at the Methodist church.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So, what do you think precipitated your parents deciding to leave their faiths to go to the Jehovah Witness? Have you ever had that conversation?
Well, I recently talked to my mother about that, and I always thought it was her idea because she's always been more like the religious stronghold in the family. But it was more my dad.
Okay.
My dad liked their theology. I don't know if he was just tired of the Catholic Church. I mean, he was an altar boy and all that.
Okay.
Down in, I think it was Pontiac, Michigan.
Okay, in Pontiac? Okay.
Yeah. But I really don't know why. Maybe he just liked the people. We were living on a farm.
Yeah.
There was a small congregation. They were very different.
Okay.
You know, and they had a strict set of rules, and, you know.
Tell us a little bit about those rules.
Well,
because you know, I asked this in not to denigrate the Jehovah Witness, but to give people an understanding of what it means to be a Jehovah Witness.
Well, what does it mean to be a Jehovah's Witness?
Or what would the rules? What would they really?
Well, let's see. To start with, we don't celebrate. They don't celebrate holidays.
Okay.
Most of them, anyway. You know, Christmas, birthdays. They all have pagan origins. So.
Okay.
We don't serve in the military. They don't. I keep saying we. They don't serve in the military. Don't vote.
Okay.
Okay. We don't. They don't stand for the national anthem.
Okay.
They're really not allowed to be a part of this world. When Jesus said, you know, I am no part of this world, you are to be no part of this world. So it's sort of like you have to go to school, unless they're homeschooled, like nowadays you can do. But back then we didn't have homeschool.
Sure.
So. You know, and you're not really allowed to be a part of like the sports teams or any of those.
Would that be because it'd be a pagan origin again?
No, it's just a matter of worldly association.
Okay, worldly association. And yet, there seems to be a dichotomy in that type of thing, wouldn't you say? Because we live in this world,
right?
And yet, not that you can't not be of this world, but you have to somehow engage in it at every level.
Sure.
Even if you're farming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, here you are, a young man, 8 years old, a young boy, 8 years old. What was it like growing up in a Jehovah Witness family?
Well, you know, Boyne City, I was born and raised in Boyne City, Michigan.
Okay.
It's a small town, you know, and I went to a very small school.
Okay.
So I think our graduating class had 100 people.
Okay, yeah.
And at the time, the classes I was at, the school I was at, had 25 students.
Okay.
So everyone knew that we were Jehovah's Witnesses and really didn't make an issue out of it.
Right.
And I have to give my parents a lot of credit because they didn't make an issue out of, you know, like having my friends over to spend the night and to play together and stuff like that. But when it came to like going to their birthday parties or, you know, any kind of social function like that, it was out of the question.
You couldn't go to those?
No.
You go to those. What would your worship service be like as a young boy?
Well, at the time we had 3 meetings a week. And Sundays were an hour of public talk.
Okay.
And then we had.
When you say public talk, who would do the speaking?
Usually one of the elders or one of the men in the congregation.
Okay.
So sometimes we had an outside speaker.
Okay.
You know, from a different church or
Sure.
Kingdom Hall, I should say.
Yep.
Okay. And what exactly was the question?
Well, and I was
again?
wondering what the worship would have been like.
Oh, okay. Well, we had the public talk, and then we had the Watchtower study.
Okay.
If you've ever picked up a Watchtower,
I've seen the Watchtower. I mean,
Okay.
I've had them come to my door and give me the literature.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know that there's a section in there where there's like 25 questions or 20 questions in an article, and we would go through that particular article,
Okay.
and then you would raise your hand and answer the question. Somebody would read the paragraph, and you know we'd study that for an hour.
Okay.
And then Tuesday night was our hour-long book study.
Okay.
And Thursday night was the first hour was public speaking. It was for ministry school, so whatever age you were, there were different talks you gave. The men
Okay.
in training gave 2 and 5. The women gave 3 and 4. So,
Did you ever have to publicly speak?
Oh yeah.
How was that?
It's nerve-wracking. It's very nerve-wracking.
What was your first time? How old were you when you gave your first? You recall?
I think I was 9.
9 years old.
Yeah.
That's difficult for a 9-year-old boy to stand up and.
Well, it was difficult for a lot of them.
Yeah.
But, there was some guys, kids that were younger than I was. There was a 6-year-old.
Wow.
You know, and you know, I think it all depends. Some people are a natural ham and they like the spotlight, and there were other kids though that were just like they
of
bust
course.
out in tears. You know.
Mark, was there any type of liturgy involved with your meetings? In other words, was there any type of ritual liturgy that you go through?
No.
No. So it was all pretty much just based on the Jehovah Witness, on the Bible they had, and the teachings of the Bible.
Right.
But no ritualistic rites of any type.
None. I think once a year we had the memorial,
Okay.
and that's when they have the wine and unfermented bread.
Okay.
You know, but that was just a matter of you had to be a member of the 144,000
Oh, okay. Of
to
course.
partake.
Yes.
And we only had one member in our kingdom.
And how would they know that they were one of them?
They just know.
They just know.
Yes. You know. So
Was it voted upon, or is that?
no.
They just would designate that one of the 144,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since the end of the Gentile times, according to the witnesses, was 1914.
Right.
That's when Jesus came back invisibly. So that this generation will by no means pass away. So the 144,000, the only ones that are going to heaven, would come out of the flock.
Okay.
So at that time, there were people alive in 1914 who would have to identify themselves if they had the calling to be one of the 144,000.
Well, if you're in this group and only one is considered 144,000, would that mean the rest of you know you're not going to heaven?
Correct.
Would there be any way to get there?
No. You don't go to heaven. You will inherit the earth, you know, after Armageddon.
After Armageddon, you'll inherit the earth.
Yeah, there'll be the 1,000-year reign of Christ.
And that will be your heaven.
Yes, you'll be on earth forever.
On earth forever.
Uh-huh. Well, after Satan is let loose after the 1,000-year reign,
Okay.
then there's another test, and then,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
that's
So,
what they believe.
Well, and here you are in a Jehovah Witness, and you're probably believing this, I'm sure.
Oh, totally.
You're absorbed in it, and it seems to make sense at the time.
Well, yeah, and you're, you know, I'm 8, 9 years old, and my parents
Yeah.
believe it, and sure, I believe it 100%.
You spoke about elders. What would be the criteria to be an elder in the church?
Well, you would have to be like an outstanding, I guess.
Okay.
Like if you had a family, they'd have to, you know, be up to the par of your children being obedient and your wife.
Would that designate you as one of the 144,000?
No,
Not necessarily.
no, not necessarily.
Why wouldn't the one who is one of the 144,000 be the leader?
Well, he usually is one of the leaders.
Okay.
But in our particular case, when I was growing up, he was one of the elders for a time.
Okay.
But I think as he got older, you know, he just wanted to kind of step back. and,
Okay.
you
Okay.
know.
So here you are, a 9-year-old boy going on 10 years old.
Uh-huh.
What starts to happen? I mean, what starts you on this journey to the Catholic faith?
Well, I really didn't question it much. We were told that in the fall of 1975 would be the end of the 6,000-year reign of man, and that was very well implied, strongly implied,
Okay.
that that was going to be the end. So I was a sophomore in high school. It didn't happen, of course. And you know, to be honest with you, it really didn't come as a big surprise
Yeah.
to me. And at the same time, I was kind of hoping this wasn't it, you know. But
If that would have come, that would have meant that you wouldn't have gone to heaven because you weren't one of the 144,000.
correct.
And so you would eventually inherit the earth.
Yes.
Okay.
If I were to die during the Great Tribulation,
Okay.
or during Armageddon, I mean, as like a martyr, you might say, or for the faith,
Okay.
I would be resurrected.
Okay.
Now, see, Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in like this, the soul, the spirit,
Right.
something separate. You know, when you're dead, that's it. There's nothing that goes back to God. God can recreate you, you know, but
So a reincarnation.
basically, yeah. But there's
More like
no
the
soul.
Hindus.
Well, I wouldn't even say that because they believe in the transmigration of the soul.
Right.
We don't have a soul.
Okay.
We are a soul.
Okay.
So it was put to me that God will recreate you with the same thought patterns and basically the way you exactly were, so you'll be able to identify yourself.
Okay.
And I always thought, well, then you could make 10 of me that could identify
That's
myself.
right.
So what makes me unique?
Yeah.
And that got me to going on then we must have a spirit, we must have a soul, something that sets us apart.
But is a 9 or 10-year-old boy thinking like this, or is it
No, but
No.
a 15-year-old is.
15-year-old?
Yeah.
So as you're going through this journey as a Jehovah Witness, things are starting to pop up that don't make sense?
Yeah, a lot of things are starting to pop up, and I'm listening to some of this stuff, and it's sort of like I would ask. It's not saying that, and I don't agree with that, and my father would do the same thing. You know, he'd say, "Well, I don't agree with
What
it."
would be the repercussions of doing that?
Well, if you ask too many questions, you know, you're going to be known as a troublemaker.
Okay.
You know, well, I'm 15 or 16, so I'm still doing it my parents' way under protest, pretty much. But my father reached a point in 1977 where there was things going on, and he was an elder, and that was it. He quit.
He quit the Jehovah Witness.
He quit, and he was what they call disfellowshipped.
Okay.
And slowly but surely, each one of us kids, you know, there were 5 of us, one by one, were disfellowshipped as
Okay.
the years went by.
Did you remain after your father quit?
I remained for about another 3 years.
About another 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
During that 3 years after your father left the Jehovah Witness, what's going on with Mark?
Not much. I mean, Mark's going through adolescence. He's 16. He's getting his license. He's hanging out with his fellow Jehovah's Witness friends.
Okay.
We're going to meetings, but, you know, we're being typical teenagers.
Right.
You know. But at the same time, I am
a bit rebellious.
a bit rebellious, but, you know, nothing serious. You know, I mean, we weren't smoking and drinking, and, you know, we were just out having fun.
Yeah.
And we took our faith seriously. We would defend it in high school, and we
Okay.
would be put down for it at times.
Okay.
But at the same time, I'm just coasting, as it were. But I'm seeing more and more of things I'm not agreeing with, and
Okay.
you know, I'm sort of not going. I'm going. I'm not going. You know, back and forth, in and out.
Okay. So it sounds as if maybe grace is starting to work in Mark without you knowing it,
Maybe.
because you're starting to question.
Mm-hmm.
And the questioning is a sign of a deeper interior movement.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I know it's hard for us to pinpoint what it is, but what were you think if you were thinking in terms of all of Christianity as compared to the Jehovah Witness? What would that have been?
Well, see, that's just it. I mean, when I got in my 20s and 30s, I would work with this woman in a video business, and I would go into a lot of churches to videograph, you know, weddings and stuff. And I would always be surrounded by, you know, some of them were Catholic Church or whatever.
Yes.
And I wished I could believe again.
Yeah.
But the experience of being a witness, I wouldn't say I was bitter, you know. I just couldn't believe it. I wouldn't trust
Yeah.
that ever again, you know.
Yeah.
It was just all kind of corny and not true.
Didn't seem to make sense yet.
No. You You know, I thought people, I would never put you down for whatever your faith was. It was just, I felt like you were self-deception, and one day something's going to happen, and you're going to see, you know. My father passed away in 2009, and we were up there for that, and my sister at that time had been, quote-unquote, born again.
Okay.
And my mother had left the Witnesses for like 10 years before that.
Okay.
And she was back in the Methodist Church, and she always said she had been praying for me. And so my sister invited me to go to church.
Nothing stronger than a mama's prayer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's true. And
That's
she
true.
prayed for all of us, and she said, God has told me that all of my children one day will worship him again. And I was like, I don't want to, you know, burst their bubble or anything, but
Yeah.
I just cannot ever imagine that happening. So anyway, I picked up a Bible and I started reading through it when I was staying at my brother's house, you know, and I was by myself, and I just thought, well, I'm going to pray about this, and I said, give me a scripture. So I, you know, not to make it sound like a card trick or
Yeah.
something, and I opened it up, and it was to Matthew 17:20, and it says, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there.
That's right.
And it will move for you, and nothing will be impossible for you. And so I thought, you know, well, maybe that's a fluke or something. And I really started to entertain the idea of, could I possibly really ever believe in this again? So when I got, after the funeral, I came home and I started attending church. And
You know, Mark, you hit on the crux of really an issue for many Christians, is that can you believe in this Christ and who he says he is?
mm-hmm.
That's really the crux of our Christian faith.
Mm-hmm.
Can this Jesus be who he says he is? Were you struggling with that also?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yes.
But I have to admit, when I looked back at certain circumstances I had gotten myself into over the years, I mean, there were a couple of them that were just almost impossible. But the right thing came along at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And it was sort of like, I attribute that probably a lot to my mother and her prayers,
Yeah.
you know. And so anyway, that served as kind of a testimony to me. And I enrolled in a Bible college for a couple of years.
Okay.
And I worked on that every day until I finished my degree in it. And so we went
non-denominational?
non-denominational.
Okay.
And then I went to work for that ministry for a couple of years.
Okay.
And we dealt with some Catholic issues. And of course, it was just totally, no, there was no Immaculate Conception, and no, she was not a perpetual virgin because of, Jesus had brothers and sisters, without really having any idea what I'm talking about, you know. So I went into a Catholic church one evening, and just to find out what the hubbub was all about, because I'd been church hopping. And I walked in, and I just knew it. You know, it was just a feeling. It was just a electricity.
What do you think it was?
I think it was the Spirit of God.
You know, many times I've had many people tell me that, and they say they walk in to a Catholic church and there's something different. And I always tell them, Jesus is present in the sacrament of the Eucharist, there in the tabernacle. And it really brings a whole different aura in that church. It brings that peace that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But did you know that at the time?
No. I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, all I know is, though, when I walked in, it was very, very solemn.
Yeah.
And it was very, I don't know the word for it, but I had a lot of respect for everyone, because they were very quiet, and some people were kneeling and praying, and I started doing the same thing. And I was always told, Catholic Church is just, that's this Babylon the Great. That's
of course. We're the great whore of Babylon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, it may be wrong, but it sure feels right.
Yeah.
And after that, I just got in touch with someone for the RCIA classes. And
what did you find as you're going on this journey, if you can think of it, one of the most intriguing, or I should say, contradictory to what you believed?
Ooh, you name it.
Yeah, you name it.
Okay. My hardest part, I think, was Mary.
Yeah.
Because with that Protestant training and just witness training, she was nothing more than
a vessel.
A vessel.
Yeah.
And There's nothing special about her, you know, but when you really stop to think about it, I mean, she became pregnant by the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
I mean,
I think there's something rather special about that.
there is something very that's to be respected.
And she bore the Son of God. She was the Theotokos. She was the Mother of God, as the church will say.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, you know, when I seen the statues and everything, I was like, well, that's, you know, that's Mary worship, you know.
Yes.
You know, and then I started this 6 months of back and forth with Protestant, Catholic, you know, and looking at both sides of the issue, and I think I was almost like I was compelled, just drawn, literally pulled into the church, you know, almost kicking and screaming.
But you know, Mark, that's a great experience, because when you're under this constant barrage of back and forth, you're catechizing yourself. You're learning, and you're really you're answering a lot of your own questions, because you can go this way and you say, but wait a minute, this doesn't make sense, and you come back to this truth, and it starts to unravel again, to really kind of unfold again, and you start to really get a deeper understanding of that. Is that kind of what your journey was like?
Absolutely. I mean, I would get myself to the point where I said, okay, I'm staying here. I'm staying here in my Lutheran church. I'm happy with the people. I'm happy with the Bible studies. Everything's great, you know.
Yeah.
But as soon as I got home, or a day later, I'm on the internet. I'm looking at Catholic websites. I'm looking at Catholic paraphernalia. I'm looking at, and I finally saw a woman who just talked about saints, talked about her faith. It was like almost like a 3-minute promotional video. And after I saw her do that, it was just like, that's when it became clear to me, after all that this is what I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you started on your journey through RCIA. Where did you do that at?
St. Peter and Paul.
St. Peter and Paul. And that was what? That was about 6 months for you? How long was your RCIA program for you?
Well, let's see. Yeah, it started in October, I think September, October, and went through March.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself at the beginning combative at all?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Almost, maybe a little bit challenging, you know,
Okay.
or argumentative, or
Okay.
a little, you know.
But they're used to that.
Very.
Yeah, the RCIA people used to it, because they know that we're coming in from different denominations, maybe from like a Jehovah Witness, from a background on that, and you're really experiencing something totally different.
Yeah. I didn't want to take out any frustrations on them. It's just sort of like, well, how do we explain this? How do you explain this? You know? Sometimes I would just ask because I've never gotten a good answer for this particular. But there were so many things about the church that made sense to me, you know. And there's just so much there to the Mass, to the liturgy. It's all right there. And I realized that what was missing in the Protestant churches that I was attending, you know, was the liturgy, you know, it was just something missing there.
You know, many times when people say, I'll say to them, they'll say, we're a communion church, we have communion. I say, no, there's a difference. We are a Eucharistic church.
Yeah.
We believe in the true presence of Christ. It's not just communion, it's Eucharist. So when were you brought into the church?
About a year ago, March.
About a year ago.
March 30th.
You know, Mark, I know in my conversations with you, you're a very strong Catholic now. And you have really jumped into it, both feet.
You have to.
Yeah, you have to. And you have really catechized yourself, and I would say you're becoming an apologist for the faith, because you have a keen sense of what it means to be Catholic.
I am. I'm always studying books. I just finished a little series on Mormonism.
Okay.
I know about the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay.
Okay. And then I spent about 3 months next to my Catholic studies. I studied Islam.
Yes.
And I read the Quran.
Yes.
And a lot of the hadiths and stuff. And I got a picture of what 1% of Christians only do and read the Quran, so that we can understand each other.
Yes.
You know, because I see a lot of Islam is here.
Yeah.
In the United States.
Yes.
And it's going to grow because they believe in big families, and we're cutting back on families.
We're contracepting our way out of existence.
And aborting.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. What a tragedy.
So probably within 20, 30 years, you know,
yeah.
Islam is going to be a force to be contended with.
A force to be reckoned with. It is. You know, it's amazing. I think about, we tell salespeople, you know, you not only have to know your product, but you have to know your competition. Because the way you sell your product is to know what your competition is about, so you can have a defense against it. And that's really what you're talking about, is we have to know, and I'm not calling them our enemies, but we have to have an understanding of what it means to defend our faith, cognitively, to be able to articulate it in a very good fashion. And that's what you've learned, I take, in your journey.
I think so, because, you know, it's so easy. You see a lot of that, you know, well, the apologists arguing and fighting with each other.
Right.
Why? I think there's a better way, especially with what the church teaches about that, you know.
Well, when we speak in truth and we speak in confidence, there's really no sense in arguing.
No.
Because what we need to do is we speak the truth and let the grace of God work through it. And then that's how people are brought to the revelation of the truth, is when they hear it, like you, it starts to raise something up within our conscience and starts to ask questions in that sense.
Sure. We were having a Bible study at St. John Vianney's on Monday night, and it's on the evangelization, and it's Father Barron's series.
Oh yes.
And it's just
wonderful Catholicism.
Oh, absolutely. And you get people sitting around, you know, the conference table, and everybody's exchanging ideas, and it's something that you can get really excited about.
No.
I know I do.
You know, if people would just take the time to watch the series, regardless of their faith, and just take a chance on that, to see the history of our church, it makes a very logical sense in where it brings you to, and he does a marvelous job in that series, and you know, I'm sure it's been just an exciting journey for you, and I always say to people like you, welcome home, because it really is an understanding of coming back into a Catholic church.
Well, I think that's, you know, like that TV show on EWTN, The Journey Home.
Yes.
And I've watched people say it's a feeling of coming home, and it really is. I don't know if a lot of cradle Catholics can really appreciate what they have, but when you've been out there without it, and when you've been searching for it and you find it, it really is. It's a feeling of home, and I'm very comfortable with it. You know, I would never have thought 6 years ago I would be sitting here telling you this. You know, I mean, I was just...
Well, that is, Mark, by no other means but the grace of God working within you and bringing you to that revelation. And as you grow, he continues to give you wisdom. So I want to thank you for being here this evening, because it really is an understanding of how God works through us and allows us to journey on our own, and he gives us that latitude to return to him. So thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And I want to thank all our viewers for watching, and as always, we give all praise to Jesus Christ, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.